Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, how are you? This is the Committee on Law and Government. We have obtained a quorum with Councilman Good, Councilman O'Brien, and Councilman Heenan. For the record, Bill number 140724 and Resolution 140735 will be held to the call of the chair at the request of the sponsor. That's the bill dealing with the International Trade Authority. Ms. Marconi, will you please read the title of the bill and resolution that is before us today?
Bill number 150216, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified electors of the City of Philadelphia of an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter establishing and defining the responsibilities of the Office of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Affairs, fixing the date of a special election for such purpose, prescribing the form of ballot questions to be voted on, and authorizing appropriate officers to publish notice and to make arrangements for the special election. And Resolution 150225, resolution proposing an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter to provide for the creation of an Office of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Affairs, to provide for the powers and duties of such office, and to otherwise provide for incorporation of the office into the city government, and providing for the submission of an amendment to the electors of Philadelphia.
Thank you. And our first panel is?
Rue Landau and Helen Fitzpatrick.
And while they're approaching, just for the record, excuse me, there is a written testimony submitted by Alan Irving from the University of Pennsylvania in support of this bill and resolution. And as you can say, while the witnesses are sitting down, we are a little tight on time because there'll be another hearing coming. So everybody that submitted written testimony, it will be submitted for the record, and I would appreciate you summarizing your statements. Yes, I'm looking at you, Ms. Landau. That's right.
I don't know how to say that.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman Greenlee and members of the Committee on Law and Government. I'm Rue Landau, Executive Director of the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations, and I'm here to express support for Bill number 150216 and Resolution number 150225, which seeks to place on the November 2015 ballot a measure to make permanent an entity expressly focused on the concerns and plights of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community in this great city. I would like to take a moment to thank Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown for advancing this legislation. As you know, the PCHR is a city agency charged with administering and enforcing the Fair Practices Ordinance, the city law that protects people from unlawful discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. Our agency also resolves issues of intergroup conflicts in communities and neighborhoods throughout the city. Philadelphia has long been at the forefront of passing laws to protect members of the LGBT community from discrimination. Since 1982, when sexual orientation was first added to the Philadelphia Fair Practices Ordinance, Philadelphia has continued to extend numerous additional protections, including life partnership benefits in 1998 and protections against gender identity discrimination in 2002. In 2011, the law was amended again to strengthen all of the LGBT protections, including adding increased fines and penalties for violating the ordinance. Finally, in 2013, additional measures were added to codify LGBT-specific city administrative practices that had not been written into the law, and also to create new protections for transgender individuals, including the historic offering of transgender inclusive health benefits to city employees. Indeed, Philadelphia has made great progress throughout all areas of government on LGBT issues, despite significant obstacles at the state and federal levels. In fact, for 2 years in a row, Philadelphia has gained national recognition for its LGBT laws and policies, earning perfect scores on the Human Rights Campaign's Municipal Equality Index. Philadelphia is ranked one of the highest scoring big cities that does not have statewide LGBT protections. While Philadelphia has made great strides in areas of legislating, administering, and enforcing laws and policies that protect our LGBT residents, workers, and visitors, there are many more ongoing issues that are of grave importance to the community. The Human Rights Campaign recently reported that 4 in 10 youth say the communities in which they live are not accepting of LGBT people, and a staggering 92% of LGBT youth hear negative comments from school, the internet, and their peers. In addition, the Williams Institute cited an eye-opening statistic that 40% of homeless youth identified as LGBT. In its Access to Healthcare study, Lambda Legal reports that transgender people face significant barriers to equal, consistent, and high-quality healthcare, resulting in their disengagement from the healthcare system. Philadelphia is working hard to overcome these obstacles. These and other concerns demand ongoing and consistent attention. Whether it is LGBT youth homelessness, criminal justice reform, access to health care, or a multitude of transgender-specific needs, the city's Office of LGBT Affairs provides essential oversight and guidance for policy development, community outreach, public education, and capacity building. Making the Office of LGBT Affairs permanent in the Home Rule Charter is essential, as there is no guarantee that future leaders will be as protective of the rights of LGBT community as City Council and this administration has been. Permanency will provide uniformity and clarity to the ongoing work of this important office so that Philadelphia can continue to be a leader in LGBT rights. I just want to add for a moment that to just take a pause and give a shout out to our friend Gloria Casarez, who is absolutely sitting here at this table with us now. She has taken this office and moved it to great strides, and thankfully Nellie Fitzpatrick was able to step in and continue running with the ball, because they've been doing some amazing things. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for all the work the Human Relations Commission and your staff does. Before Ms. Fitzpatrick, let me just recognize the presence of Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, who's the sponsor of this bill and resolution. Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Greenlee and members of the Committee on Law and Government. My name is Helen Fitzpatrick, but most of you know me as Nellie. I'm the Director of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Affairs for the City of Philadelphia. I'm here today to testify on Bill number 150216 and Resolution number 150225, which, if enacted, would place on the November 2015 ballot an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter, which would establish a permanent Office of LGBT Affairs here in the City of Philadelphia. As a proud lesbian and a devoted Philadelphian, it is an honor to testify before all of you today. I would like to express my most sincere gratitude to Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown for sponsoring this measure and for all she has done and continues to do to champion LGBT rights here in our city. Like so many in our diverse community, I'm grateful to live in a city that has made such incredible and inspiring strides towards true equality. As a former district attorney, current member of the Philadelphia Prisons Board of Trustees, and a civilian trainer for the Department of Justice Transgender Initiative, I'm keenly aware of the enormous amount of work there still is left to do to achieve equality for the LGBT community here in Philadelphia and beyond. Currently, the Office of LGBT Affairs serves to provide services and information to the LGBT people of our city through outreach and public education. The office advises the mayor and Philadelphia city government on the needs of LGBT residents and supports policy development and implementation throughout the city. This office strives to create open dialogue and access between the community and the government that serves them through continued education, collaboration, and presence. On January 20th of this year, Mayor Nutter appointed me as the Director of the Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs. To give you all a sense of what my office does, here's a sample list of projects that the Office of LGBT Affairs is currently engaged in. My full written testimony is submitted, and I'm going to do my best to hack away to shorten this list as we go, because I understand we're under some time constraints. Working with our law enforcement and criminal justice systems, we do this through continued education and capacity building of all Philadelphia Police Department personnel on Directive 152, which is entitled Interactions with Transgender Individuals, which I helped create while working in the District Attorney's Office, by establishing guidelines and support structures for all police athletic league centers to ensure that LGBT children are met with safe and affirming environments and officers, collaborating with police recruitment to ensure that our police force begins to reflect the LGBT community safely and openly within our ranks, working with the Department of Justice to ensure that LGBT issues are visible and accounted for throughout community-oriented police roundtables at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Philadelphia, educating and discussing developments within the police department with the LGBT community so that they are aware of what is happening and that we can increase crime reporting, safety, and accountability. Continued consultation and education with countless assistant district attorneys on a case-by-case basis, as well as with members of the defense bar, to ensure that not only victims of crime, but people in the community who have been arrested and charged with crimes are met with respect, dignity, and provided with appropriate services. Continuing advocacy for inclusive hate and bias crime at the state level, advocating for further programming and awareness in our prison system regarding the high rate of incarceration and recidivism within the LGBT community. We will continue to be in the offices of every area of our city, seeking to ensure that there's policy and corresponding education to ensure that every single city department, agency, initiative, branch, right down to every single employee has the necessary education and appropriate level of accountability to serve the LGBT community. We will be heading to every single homeless shelter in this city to ensure that LGBT community members are able to access sheltering that is available and not turned away into the streets for who they are or how they're perceived. Other work from this office includes establishing programs for adult literacy, job training, mentoring, and support systems for our transgender community to ensure that they're able to move from unstable housing and homelessness to sustaining jobs, developing careers, and living safe, satisfying lives. Engaging businesses and corporations to understand and overcome the hurdles that transgender individuals face in seeking, maintaining, and advancing within employment opportunities. Working to ensure that LGBT seniors are getting the services and support they need as they age with dignity and understanding in our city. Working with individual schools to develop strategies and programming to serve and protect our LGBT youth and provide education and resources for each and every teacher and administrator who comes in contact with them and their families. Uniting our allied forces to help establish real cultural change in our society, neighborhoods, and cities, and helping to highlight our LGBT businesses in order to allow them to thrive and continue to grow in our city. The list goes on and on. I could easily spend hours and perhaps days here in room 400 discussing the work we need to do to create a more equitable city and society. However, there are two particular populations I would like to highlight with this limited time I have to speak in order to give you a sense of the tremendous work we have ahead. Today, our LGBT youth face a new world. There have been significant advancements, particularly in popular representations of LGBT individuals. LGBT youth see themselves reflected in LGBT characters on television shows like Glee and Modern Family. They read about actors like Neil Patrick Harris and his husband becoming fathers, and witness Laverne Cox, a transgender woman, declared one of this year's most beautiful women by People magazine. However, too often our LGBT youth are not met with the same level of celebration, respect, opportunity, or safety that is seen on TV. The tragic rates of suicide and homelessness are truly numbing. Our nation's LGBT youth comprise 5 to 8% of the overall youth population. A statistic that you will continue to hear over and over is that our LGBT youth make up 40% of our homeless youth population and have been subjected to homelessness for simply coming out as who they are. Each year in Philadelphia, we have over 2,500 kids age out of DHS in search of homes, jobs, acceptance, and opportunity. We must seek to protect and ensure opportunities for our LGBT youth. We must work to create and implement policy in our schools and our systems that give all of our children, including our LGBT children, opportunities to succeed. As a city, we must guide and support our communities and our neighborhoods to embrace these children and not cast them away in rejection. We need to ensure that our government leaders, officials, representatives, policymakers, and employees work towards creating a safe and equitable city that our youth thrive in and see themselves reflected in. To compound upon these concerns, our transgender communities trail behind our LGB communities in their push towards equality. It has taken us far too many years to get to the point of seeing that we must work to bring the T into the LGBT civil rights movement. Facing terrifying rates of homicide, victimization, homelessness, and discrimination, our transgender citizens, especially our transgender women of color, must be the focus of collaborative efforts to protect and empower them. Our city saw an outpouring of support when 2 young, white, gay men were assaulted in Center City last year. From public officials to national media outlets, the story of that horrific attack was known by all in our city and beyond. The same focus and response was not there when Diamond Williams, a transgender woman of color, was murdered. Nor was it there for Kyra Cordova or Stacy Blahnik or the countless other transgender victims of violence in our city alone. We have so much work to do to create housing, employment, and representation opportunities for our transgender communities. As a nation, we have so much work left to do in order to combat the stunning statistics of violence against our transgender citizens. We know that we can write and implement the appropriate policies and start the work of training our first responders, our city employees, appropriate school staff, prison staff, hospital staff, and transportation employees. As we move forward, we can continue the process of holding those accountable who discriminate against one of our citizens because of who they love or who they are. We must work to have our city lead by example in creating safe and equitable communities and neighborhoods, and expand opportunities for our diverse citizens to thrive. We are the birthplace of our great nation. At the very steps of Independence Hall, 40 individuals took up signs asking for equal rights and visibility for our communities almost 50 years ago. In 50 years, we have made wonderful progress for some, but not all. Over the next 50, 100, 150 years, through the continued efforts and dedication of our city government, we will look back and celebrate where we came from and the city of true equality that we have become. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, you wanted to...
Yes, thank you. I did want to put a few remarks on the record and to say thank you to both you as chairman and the members of this committee and all of those in attendance for joining us and to learn and hear about a new unprecedented action that we hope to be taken by the mayor. On March 19, 2015, I was pleased to introduce this bill number 150216 and Resolution 150225 that seeks to amend the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter and establish a permanent Office of LGBT Affairs in city government. And I might note parenthetically that this really stems from my own personal experience of having spent a lot of time earlier in my career in the arts and specifically dance, where I made a lot of good friends with members of the LGBT community and was sickened by the disrespect and just lack of being treated like a human being when we would hang out together after rehearsals. And so it comes from my own personal experience, which oftentimes is no different than being an African American and being a woman. The challenges in many ways are all the same. And so this move, or this action, seeks to try to level the playing field a little bit more where government can have an active role in trying to level the playing field. So we know that Philadelphia has an international reputation as a city that both celebrates diversity and has no tolerance for intolerance. This bill offers the LGBT community a permanent seat and voice at the table. My favorite adage, if you're not at the table, then you may be on the menu. And if you're on the menu, it's probably not in your best interest. To a community who too often faces discrimination, much like people of color and women, it is imperative that we have a direct line to the mayor's office and to city council. It's my view and it's our view that making this office permanent will send the message that while we have a lot of work to do, we're absolutely up to the challenge. So I want to acknowledge my staff, the Nutter administration, Helen Fitzpatrick, and of course Lou Randall, and all of the advocates who worked with us to bring this to this milestone this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none again. Thank you both very much for all the work you do. I think our second panel, make sure I got it right here.
Christopher Bartlett, Narush Yen, and Christopher Alston.
Good afternoon. Whoever would like to start, please identify yourself and proceed.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Bartlett, Executive Director of the William Way Community Center. Thank you, City Councilman, and thank you, Councilwoman Reynolds-Brown, for your leadership on this issue. I'm going to skip over my introduction, except to say that I've served on the Mayor's LGBT advisory boards for 15 years, both under Mayor Street and now Mayor Nutter, and I've seen the impact of leadership, folks who have the ear of the mayor and the ear of the City Council and that advisory board of bringing about incredible achievements over those 15 years. And today I want to focus on two key points. First, why is there a need for a specific permanent office for LGBT affairs? And second, the major difference that has been made by such an office during the administration of Mayor Nutter. Why the need? According to a 2007 census of LGBT citizens in Philadelphia, conducted by Philadelphia Health Management Corporation and the City of Philadelphia, about 5% of our city population is LGBT. And that population reflects the full diversity of our city with regard to race, sex, income, and geographic distribution throughout every neighborhood of the city. In many city services, including behavioral health, AIDS activities, DHS, police, and supportive housing, to name a few, LGBT citizens face significant disparities and have unique needs. This includes a marked need for services for LGBT homeless youth. Over 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBT. An incredible need for HIV prevention and treatment services among LGBT people in general, and especially people of color. A need for ongoing training and recruitment within the police department and partnership with the city's Department of Behavioral Health to ensure services for the unique needs of the LGBT population. The Office of LGBT Affairs serves as the focal point of all those needs, coordinating how various city departments figure into the big picture. This office also has had a large impact on the success and growth of the LGBT sector of our economy, reflected by the significant growth of the city's LGBT Chamber of Commerce, the Independence Business Alliance, and the growth of LGBT employee resource groups at the major Fortune 500 companies based in the city. As LGBT Affairs Director, Gloria Cazares was a key person whom LGBT business people went to address their needs and concerns. Focused attention on the needs of this population benefit the LGBT communities of the city, absolutely, but they also benefit the city as a whole. Cities that invest in equal services for the LGBT population help to create economies that attract the best and the brightest employees and citizens to their cities. Sociologist Richard Florida has said that the cities that invest in their LGBT populations do better at attracting not only individual and employees, but also corporations. More and more, in considering relocation to Philadelphia, companies are drawn by our very strong record of investment and inclusion, forged largely by the efforts of Michael Hinson and Gloria Cazares, and now Nellie Fitzpatrick, and their advisory committees over the past 15 years. And more, we are recognized as a leader nationally in these efforts. We rated a top score of 100 on the HRC Municipal Equality Index, which rated us with regards to non-discrimination laws, relationship recognition, employment opportunities, services and programs, law enforcement, and relationships with the LGBT community. And these successes ought to be built upon. And if we were to compare the achievements of the city under the Streeter and Nutter administrations to earlier administrations, much of this success is derived, I would argue, from the focused effort that results from an office that is tasked with keeping its eye on the prize of LGBT equality and subsequently benefits the entire city. A short list of the impact and influence of the LGBT office would include many great achievements, often shepherded and supported by this city council. The completion of the John C. Anderson LGBT-friendly apartments, other new initiatives to support LGBT seniors, training to every class of police academy recruits, an overhaul of the city's fair practice ordinances, the equal benefits law and LGBT equality law, growth of LGBT conventions and conferences, the growth of the Mazzoni Center as a nationally recognized center of LGBT health excellence, LGBT History Month and flag raising outside the City Hall, the Morris Home Residential Treatment Facility for transgender Philadelphians, signage and maps for the neighborhood, support for the nation's first LGBT Jazz Festival, and an upcoming summer of LGBT history on Independence Mall. I can say with confidence that though some of these achievements might have arisen without an Office of LGBT Affairs, it's unlikely that they all would have happened with such fine coordination, with such powerful impact for the entire city and all its citizens. I've made the case that investment in the city's LGBT community has benefits for all. Making permanent the Office of LGBT Affairs in the City of Philadelphia is such an investment and will lead to Philadelphia's continued leadership as a city of inclusion, equality, and growth. Thank you.
Before you start, is there anyone else here that wishes to testify? None? Okay. All right. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Nurit Shine, and I am the CEO of Mazzoni Center. I'm happy to be here today and to support the bill that would propose the amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter to establish and define the functions of the Office of LGBT Affairs on a permanent basis. And I want to thank Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds-Brown for bringing this legislation and for all the work that you have been doing on behalf of the LGBT community and every Philadelphian. Thank you. Mazzoni Center is a community-based nonprofit organization that provides a range of healthcare, legal, and social services for the LGBT individuals here in Philadelphia. We've been serving this community for 35 years. I'd like to talk about the importance of the Office of LGBT Affairs from the perspective of the thousands of individuals we serve, many of whom are among the most vulnerable in this community. Our primary care medical facility sees over 17,000 patient visits each year, and our policy has always been to welcome patients and clients regardless of their insurance status or income level. We work with young people who've been bullied in their schools, and we see over 500 LGBT youth every year through our weekly adolescent drop-in program, and most of these young people have been or are homeless. We provide legal services to LGBT individuals, many of whom are struggling with access to legal identity documents, affordable housing, employment, protecting their children and families, and more. Nearly all of our services are provided at no charge to low-income individuals. I say this because so many of the people we serve have been marginalized and discriminated against. Many have also felt voiceless within and invisible to the traditional structures of power and government. They lead busy, complicated lives, and most of them would not have the time to track, much less weigh in on every activity of city government that affects them. Since 2008, when the Office of LGBT Affairs was created, these people have had a voice in City Hall. Thanks to Mayor Nutter, to the late Gloria Caceres, and thanks now to Nellie Fitzpatrick, our clients and fellow citizens have had a resource and an advocate in City Hall, a place to turn to, a resource for information, a link to vital services, a strong ally when it was called for. Over the past few years, it's fair to say that all of our departments at Mazzoni, from mental health counseling to HIV care to legal services, have had the occasion to call on the Office of LGBT Affairs for resources or an introduction on behalf of our clients. It has been a great benefit to the people we serve to have this office as a resource. For our clients and patients, and for all LGBT Philadelphians to know that there is an office in City Hall that represents their interest and will go to bat for them is incredibly important. The Office of LGBT Affairs connects City Hall to the larger LGBT community, which is extremely diverse and represents a wide range of priorities, needs, and concerns, as you have heard from Nellie. And the link to this office provides a contact between LGBT citizens and City Hall and benefits both sides of the conversation by keeping the mayor and city officials well informed about what's going on within our communities and what are our most pressing challenges and priorities and how we can work together to address them. The existence of this office also sends a powerful message about the City of Philadelphia and the values we embrace. It helps to situate us not merely as an LGBT-friendly city, but as a leader in civil rights. I've lived in Philadelphia since 1995, and I've seen the progress we have made. It gives me and many others a feeling of tremendous pride to see our city named the most LGBT-friendly city in America. But it also carries a real-life meaning for the LGBT citizens who live and work here every day. I give credit to the Office of LGBT Affairs for its contributions to the existing LGBT advocacy network and for helping us to earn these distinctions. By voting to amend the city charter to make this office permanent one, you will ensure that LGBT Philadelphians continue to have access to this critically important resource. The community will maintain a conduit to its government, continue to feel represented and protected, and to be fully and truly engaged in the life of the city. Thank you for all the time and for consideration of this matter.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do. Any questions for either of our witnesses? Councilwoman Reynolds Brown?
I was just across the hall listening to the exciting developments that continue to happen at CHOP. And one new initiative they are looking closely at is bullying. And so I share that with you because I think there's great opportunity for what you do on behalf of young people and what CHOP is unveiling, dealing with bullying in a very 21st century way with high technology and the like. And it's just useful and helpful to know where we have healthcare institutions making inroads dealing with the issue that is faced by all children, but what I know for sure is compounded with LGBT youth. So I share that with you for you to seize the moment and sit down with them because
Well, we actually are collaborating with them on this.
You are?
Yes, we are.
Very good.
Yes.
Very, very good. Well, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. No other witnesses? That concludes our Committee on Law and Government. Record reflect Councilman Jones, our majority leader, is also present. We are now going to our public meeting, and the Chair recognizes Councilman Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Bill number 150216 be reported out of this committee with favorable recommendation. The rules of council be suspended so as to be first read in our next council session.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, Bill number 150216 reported out of this committee favorably with a rule suspension. Councilman Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that resolution 150225 be reported out of this committee with favorable recommendation.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, resolution 150225 is reported out of this committee with a favorable recommendation. Concludes the business of the Committee on Law and Government today. Thank you all for your participation.